everyone, welcome to my Lightroom series where I'll be covering how I've refined my workflow over the last 6 years. I'll cover import to export and everything in between. Let's get started. Today we're going to cover the adjustment tools. This is the crop over to the brush tool. We're going to get into each one of these and see what they can do. Let's hop over to Lightroom and get started.
Alright, now we're into Lightroom. Let's go over the adjustment tools. This is going to be up here on your Develop module, up above your basic tools here. We're going to start off with the crop tool. So you can come up, select it, or you can hit R as the keyboard shortcut. So you can see I've got these guidelines that show up. If you hit O, it will cycle through those guidelines, so you get a bunch of different grid overlay options here. You got the golden spiral, some size adjustments there, small grids, and rule of thirds. Okay, so if you hit custom, you want to make sure you come over and hit unlock so you can do a freeform crop. You also have, from this drop down, you've got several presets. Your 1:1, 4:5, 8.5:11, 5:7, and of course 2:3 or 4:6. And then you got some video or other aspect ratios here: 4:3, 16:9, 16:10, and then you can enter some custom ones, so you can put in your own ratio. And then I've got some already saved here that I've done. So a 5:1, 4:1, 2:1, and a 14:11. So those are just some custom ratios that I've done over the years, and they just get saved here. So these are more for like panoramic type stuff here. So that's your ratios there. So you also have this level adjustment, or the straighten tool. So you can click on this, and then you can draw a line on what your horizon would be. So let me reset this, and I'll show you how that works. So if I click on that, if I come down here to the bottom, I've got a nice straight line. So I'm going to just draw it across there, and you can see it just tweaked it ever so slightly. So that's one way to rotate it. You can also move your mouse to the side of the handles here, and you get this little double arrow, and you can rotate it there. You can also do it manually here by just cranking this over. Now the constrain to image, this only applies if you have applied a transform, or you have a panoramic that has some white edges around the edge, around the corners or something. If you do that constrain to image, it will only crop inside of that, and it won't show the white corners or anything like that. Okay, so that's the crop tool. So let's jump over to your healing brush or spot removal tool. Okay, so this is up here. It's the second one in. You can hit Q for that, or you can come click on it. You have clone and you have heal. So clone will take a copy, like a snapshot of another area, and patch it over it. Heal will kind of brush in that area that you've got. So I'll kind of show you some examples from this. But first, let's go through the size here. You can dial it up by using this, or you can use your brackets, left to go smaller, and right to go larger. And then you have your feather, so you can slide this down and back to see what that does. You can also hold down Shift and your bracket. Shift left bracket is smaller. Shift right bracket is to make the feather larger. And then you can change your opacity here. So let's do a couple of examples. Right now I've got a pretty big spot on my sensor, so I'm going to go and hit Visualize Spots. This is a good way to find those spots on your sensor. You click on it, Visualize Spots, and you can slide this back and forth. You can see way down here you don't really see anything, but as you crank that over, you start to see where you might see some spots. You might have some spots on your sensor. This is a good way to indicate that your sensor needs a cleaning too. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on that, and that is set to clone right now. So if I come down and turn this Visualize Spots off, it's going to clone right there. Alright, so if I heal, for this one it doesn't really make a difference because it's just a blue sky, but clone is just taking that snapshot, or taking that area and sampling it over to here. Okay, so that Visualize Spots comes in really handy for seeing those things. Let's go ahead and zoom in down to the bottom here, and let's maybe clone out some of these rocks and show you what the difference between clone and heal is. So I'm gonna clone out this rock right here. I'm holding down the bracket. It's going really slow, so I'm gonna just crank it down with the slider right here. So, and I can use, if you have a mouse that's got a wheel on it, you can zoom in and out, or up or down, and it will adjust the size of it. So I'm gonna go ahead and clone that. One quick tip here is, if you don't like where it's sampled from, if you hit the / or question mark button, you can hit that a couple of times and it will jump around and sample from different areas. Okay? Or you can, of course, grab that ring and move it somewhere else to where you think might work a little better. That's the option there. So you can see that's sampling that area. You can see that little dark impression there. If you heal, it's just going to kind of soften things up a little bit more. So it all depends on what you're trying to spot heal, on which option you use. But I find myself using the clone probably more than the heal. And so that's a couple options there. And once you've placed it, you can even still adjust the size of it and the opacity and the feather. So you can grab on the edge here and just shrink that thing down. And as you get down further, you can see that edge of that rock is starting to show. You can adjust the size here as well. You can adjust the feather. So let's take that feather all the way down, and I'll show you what that does. So hit OK, hit done. It's kind of hard to tell, but if in another scenario you'd see a hard edge around that, and maybe not necessarily something that you want. And then you've got your opacity, so as I crank this down, you can kind of see that rock showing up there. So sometimes your opacity doesn't need to be at 100%, it can be lower depending on what you're cloning out. Okay, so that is the clone stamp, or the spot removal tool. Next up is the red eye reduction. I don't use this a whole lot because I don't use on-camera flash, like, ever. So I honestly don't think I've ever used this, but it's pretty simple to do. You just take your little marker here and you draw it around the eye, and it will automatically fix it. If it can't find an eye, it'll pop up with this error. So yeah, that's really simple to use. You can change it from a red eye or a pet eye. Okay, so after that we've got the graduated filter, or M for your keyboard shortcut. Okay, so we're going to hit New. We're going to zoom out on this. I'm just going to hit Command minus, and that zooms out. So you can adjust all of your settings that you see here. So your temperature, tint, down through your exposure, texture, clarity, sharpness, noise, defringe, all that stuff you can adjust locally. So this is the same for the adjustment brush, the graduated filter, radial filter, and your adjustment brush. So you can adjust all these settings locally. So for this one, I'm gonna increase the exposure on the foreground and decrease the exposure on the sky, just to even it out a little bit more. So let's go ahead, and I'm just gonna go and jump into one of the presets, and let's do Dodge Lighten, and we'll bump it up to about 0.5. So just hit 0.5 in there, and I'm just gonna grab from the bottom and extend it all the way up. So you can see as I do this, if I do a small gap here, it's a very harsh brush, or very harsh line. If you extend it, it's a nice soft, kind of nice feathered adjustment there. So quick tip to show you what is being affected, you can hit O, and it will pull up the affected area and show that in red there. So that's a pretty good area. Oops. You can grab the handles to rotate this as you need to. If you've got a mountain peak or something here off to the side, I'm going to change this back to flat. You can grab the handles afterwards and adjust them as you need to. You click in the center here, this will move the whole thing up or down. So I'm going to move it up to here so that I get the peaks there. Now the problem is I'm catching the sky too, and I don't want to increase the exposure of my sky. I want to keep that the same. So I'm going to use a range mask in order to negate that. So we're going to click on luminance, and then I'm just going to grab this from the, so this is the highlights and this is the shadows. So I'm going to grab the highlights. I don't want those, so I'm just going to crank those down. And you can see that red comes out of the clouds there. And as you get down a little further, it's starting to come out of the rocks and stuff down here below, which is probably not necessarily a bad thing. So we'll kick it to about 60 or so. So again, I hit O to show me what that looks like without that mask, that red mask on. So that looks pretty good. I like that. And you can come down here and hit this toggle. This turns it off, so you can kind of do a before and after to see how that brought up the exposure a little bit on some of this dark area. So I like that. That looks good. One of the other things here you can do is adjust the smoothness. So you can see right now it's just kind of average. If you crank it down or up, you can see how that affects what's being selected. So I'm going to keep it right about in the middle because that was pretty good for that. So one other tip for the adjustment is if you want to brush in or brush out a certain area, you can do that as well. So with your range mask or with your adjustment selected, you're going to come up to the brush and you can brush in areas, or if you hold down Option, you can brush out areas. So you see it has the minus there. Or you can come over and select the erase button here. You don't have to hold down Option while you brush. So this one I'm going to just make a couple of quick adjustments. And then let's say we want to remove this area down here for whatever reason. We can do that. Okay, so this was set to auto mask, so it's missing a couple of rocks in there that were really dark. So let's change that a little bit. And if I make this range bigger, you can see it's kind of softening that. You can also adjust your flow so that as you brush it across, it's a nice soft gradient there. So you can just get kind of creative with that. But that's a way to maybe subtract an area that maybe is the same color, but you want to highlight it or whatever else. So I'm going to go ahead and hit done. So that's your graduated filter tool. Next up is the Radial Filter, which does pretty much the same thing, but it's constrained to a circle. So this is this second one from the right, or Shift M will activate that tool. And now you've got, before we go and place it, like I said, it's all the same effects as the graduated filter. Down here we've got this feather and invert. So invert will apply the settings inside the radius, and if you uncheck it, it will apply it outside the radius. So we're going to go ahead and do invert, and I'm just going to highlight a couple of these brighter areas just to increase exposure on those. So I'm going to draw a nice radius, kind of an ellipsoid radius around here, and you can see it kind of puts a pretty big feather on it. So what we're going to use is that range mask again to reduce that down to just the area that's brighter. So we're going to do a luminance, and we're going to crank this thing up until just those white or light colored rocks are selected there. So this is getting up there pretty high. So that's what that looks like. Here's a before and after. So see, it's just brightening it up, and I can adjust my exposure or whatever I need to there. If I want to crank up the whites or clarity or something like that for that area, I can do that. So that was before, and that's after. And again, if it's still getting a little too much around the edges, I can come in and use the brush tool and hold down Option, or come in and select erase, and that will erase those areas. So let's just come in here. I'm going to erase out some of this down below and some of this up above. Again, O will show you what your edit is doing here, so I can come in and really brush it out until I don't see that red anymore there. Okay. So that's your graduated, or that's your radial filter. All right, the last one but not least, and in fact it's probably the most used for me anyways, is the brush tool. Okay, so the brush tool, or K, activates that. Is just like the others, you get all the same settings. but I use this to brush in certain areas. So again, I can use a radial filter here, or I can use the brush tool and get a little bit more of what I want. So if I zoom in here, and let's say I just want to hit these ridges here and highlight those, crank that down a little bit so it's not so much of a difference, but I can come in and just kind of hit those white areas and the ridges here, just to kind of add some contrast. I can do that with the brush tool. Okay, so if I hit return, jump back out, so that's kind of what that looks like before and after. And again, if you want to edit that, you can come in and use your range mask, hold down Option to erase areas. If you want to use an auto mask, that will paint in just an area that your brush is over. So let's go up to a corner over here, and I'll show you kind of what that does. It's pretty similar to the range mask, but it can be used in a few different applications. So let's say I want to bring the sky down over here, and I just want to paint right along the edge there. If I have the auto mask on, I can just brush, and I don't have to be real precise. I can just kind of get messy around there. As long as my plus, that center plus icon doesn't cross over. If I cross over, you can see how that darkens that in. So let's hit undo, and I can just go in here. I can just go in here and brush this in. So one of the problems I don't like about the auto mask is that your edges get this weird haloing effect. So I typically don't use that a whole lot anymore, unless it's like a certain color that I'm trying to brush in. The range mask is definitely more effective and more produces a better result than the auto mask is, but it does have its uses there. So, all right, so that is your develop adjustment tools. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments below, or shoot me an email or a message over on Instagram or Facebook. And I hope you guys enjoyed this. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.